Good morning. It's your call. This is BBC Radio 5 Live. I'm Nicky Campbell. So, Anders Breivik, is he insane? The blood of 77 people on his hands. He's due to testify in court this morning. Expected to say he regrets he didn't kill more. He says what he did was a political act. A protest against growing multiculturalism in Norway. So, in his mind, it was necessary on the 22nd of July last year to detonate that car bomb in Oslo. In his mind, he was right to then travel to the island of Utøya to massacre those terrified teenagers, many of whom were running for their lives when he shot at them at point-blank range. The work of somebody deranged, just plain evil. Dr. David Holmes is a criminal psychologist. He says Breivik is not insane because he knew what he was doing and he planned it well.
This is moral insanity. This is actually in court a aggravating factor rather than a mitigating factor, to have this kind of lack of empathy for others.
Do you agree? Morally insane. Can you be sane and do that sort of thing? Have you ever met anyone who is absolutely mentally capable, but also capable of pure evil? Anders Breivik. That's the discussion this morning. Is he insane? 0500 909 693. Text 85058. Good morning. It's 6 minutes past 9 o'clock. We're going to speak to Oliver James. I'm delighted to say, the criminologist and author of the F You Up and other works. How your early years affect your adult personality. Oliver, the very man. Good morning to you.
Hi, Nicky.
Hi. And Dr. Mike Isaac as well, a consultant psychiatrist at South London Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. Dr. Mike, hello to you.
Good morning.
The question is on the insanity or otherwise of Anders Breivik. How can a man do that? How can somebody do that and not be insane? We've got Scott in Nottingham, we've got Brian in Abingdon, but first of all, Tore Bekkedal, who was on the island of Utøya when Breivik carried out the attacks. Tore, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, good morning. I mean, you managed to hide in a bathroom when the attacks were being carried out. What's it like for you now, watching him in court?
Well, of course, it's no merry reunion. It's not a person I enjoy seeing. But at the same time, it's a relief to see a normal court procedure proceeding as much as you can use the word normal in this context, of course.
And do you feel that he is insane, or is he in control of his faculties, utterly rational, utterly logical, or do you think that that is not the case?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's important for me to underline that it's important for me that this is the court's decision and not mine. I can only speak to what I'm more comfortable with, or what I have an easier time reconciling with my observations. And in terms of him as it is indeed very difficult for me to reconcile his actions and the detailed level of planning and so on and so forth with on one level with a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, because as far as I've been able to determine, if you're paranoid schizophrenic, then your mind doesn't work very well, plainly put, and if your mind doesn't work very well, then it's very difficult to plan such a major terrorist attack over a course of 9 years. And on another level, it's almost a bit too convenient to diagnose the man rather than diagnose a part of society, because, I believe that his political views, of course, he takes them to an extreme, but there are varying shades of very many of the same elements in society as they are. Because you have the English Defence League, we don't have an organisation of that magnitude and level of insanity.
But this is completely different. Whatever one thinks about these groups, the English Defence League, is completely different to hold certain views, as many do, on the far right and on the far left. But it's completely different from.
You have to realize that that's where the absurdity starts. Once you believe that Muslims are invading Europe and the socialists are trying to aid them, then, of course, it would be entirely logical to take recourse against it.
Well, is it entirely logical to take that type of recourse against it? Sure, you're saying it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Okay.
But of course, I'm not using this as a kind of a more.
But then you say, where does the spectrum end? I mean, it's perfectly legitimate to have concerns about the scales of immigration. It's perfectly legitimate to have concerns, whether we do or not, about cultural change in a particular neighbourhood. So, what you're saying, I hugely respect you for coming on the radio and talking about this. But what you're saying is it's a very, very nuanced and difficult area, isn't it? By saying that one thing leads to another.
I'm merely saying that. What has been interpreted by the court appointed psychiatrists and so forth as a sign of delusions and so on. That's it's not a single person with a delusion. It's a political movement with a delusion, as it were. So.
Okay. I very clearly hear that argument. What do you make of that, Oliver James?
Well, the key question as regards sanity is whether you believe things like that you're a poached egg or that pigs can fly. In other words, if you believe things that are manifestly, according to the rest of us, not true. Now, in this case, it would seem that he did have delusions, that he had, and the fact that he did careful planning doesn't get away from whether or not he was living in La La Land. So from a very, very simple, crude, using common parlance, yes, you would have to say that he was insane. But as we've discussed, it's an incredibly grey area. I mean, I once interviewed a guy who was a serial killer who'd killed 168 people. Now, during the Second World War, he was a killing machine in the Far East and ploughed his way through the Japanese and was highly commended as a soldier. Unfortunately, when the war ended, he didn't stop, and he would occasionally nip down and just kill whole villages in Japan, so they had to send him back to America, where he just hung out and killed 168 people. In fact, interestingly, though, he did have some delusions, but very few. And they were very sort of sealed off. So his mother, he'd had an appalling childhood, as nearly all violent men have had. He had an appalling childhood. His mother had been a prostitute, and sometimes he would see his mother's face on the victims of people he killed. So at times he was delusional. So it's not really black and white. You're not all delusional, not all sane. None of us are. You can argue, apparently Tony Blair may have, or Bush may have thought that God told them to invade Iraq and hundreds of thousands of people were killed. It's all, of course, a very grey area. But in this case, he would appear to have had a pretty thoroughly delusional system, which, as your last very reasonable caller points out, may have been partly influenced by a delusional, wider political belief system. But he, as an individual, must have had a thin grasp on reality, and I would...
Listen, but some of my best friends have delusional political belief systems, Oliver. Let's bring some callers, and then we'll get the response of Mike Isaac as well. A lot of calls on this, so as concise as you can, ladies and gentlemen. Brian, good morning in Abingdon. What do you think? What's your instinct on this, Brian?
Good morning to you.
Morning.
I listen with almost disbelief of these qualified psychiatrists trying to find and defend that this guy isn't mad when he goes out and kills 79 innocent young men and young women, carefully plans it in the belief that it is going to heighten his cause against the import of the religion into his country that he doesn't agree with.
So you're saying clearly this man has to be okay. Nick in Norfolk, what do you think?
Well, the Nazis all came from middle class backgrounds. They weren't insane, and look what they did. Well, there's no proof that they were insane, and I don't think he was insane at all. I think he knew exactly what he's doing. And I think his main problem, he was utterly and totally deluded. I can only go by what I hear and see on the media, but to me he comes across as a very stable, uniformed, middle-class, publicly school-educated guy. I think when they get economic problems and they can't account for them, they just use the easy scapegoat and go for the race factor. And what I fear is that there are many other people out there, like Anders Breivik, who's got the same views, although they hopefully won't resort to the same actions. And this is what we've got to try and work out. Why do they get these views, and how do they get them?
If I can butt in, I think, there's an underlying... I came into a slightly different discussion than I was prepared for. This is not a discussion about, insanity in a legal context. In a legal context, here in Norway at least, the insanity is whether or not he was aware of what he was doing. And in a paranoid schizophrenic, not simply in terms of insanity, as in whether you're not, in a common parlance kind of way, but in a clinical kind of way, if you're aware of what you're doing. And I believe that, if you plan something on this scale, then you have to be aware of what you're doing.
Well, that's a very interesting point. Mike Isaac, when you plan something on this scale or a greater scale, looking at the greatest atrocities of human history in the last century, Mike, you're still with us, yeah?
Yes, I'm still with you.
Messrs. Eichmann and Himmler and Mengele and the like, were they mad?
I think there are a couple of points here I'd want to make. Perhaps the most important message I'd want to give is that the opposite of being mentally ill isn't being mentally well and normal. The opposite of being mentally ill is not having a mental illness, and it's an important point because there is no question that someone who commits crimes like this, and I'll come on to the Nazis in a second as well because they have common features, a person that commits crimes like this is not a normal individual. They are highly disturbed at some level, partly because of what they've experienced.
For instance, that all the guards in the concentration camps in Germany were unstable. It's a political ideology that reduces people to less than human beings.
And similarly, similarly, the Cultural Revolution, Maoism, similarly, Stalinism, those
indeed,
authoritarian credos. Carry on, Mike. Sorry. No.
What I would have gone on to say is that when someone is acting within a much larger ideology or institution, you don't. What happens is that their individual psychopathologies, if you like, their individual personality quirks are given much freer rein. And this was one of the key things that among the Nazi concentration camp guards, for example, if we brought them up, they were able to split off their day job from being outwardly normal, perfectly reasonable family men. And they were able to do so sincerely for the very reason that was touched on, because they were able to make their victims into objects, subhumans,
dehumanization,
or counter-revolutionaries, or whatever you like.
Yeah.
And that kind of... but within that, you have the... concentration guards who thoroughly enjoyed their work and took it to a higher level, and those who did what they had to do, kind of thing.
For self-preservation.
Yes, but there is no need to go that extra mile. And I think what you have in state systems like Nazism, like the Cultural Revolution, is the opportunity for some highly disturbed individuals to flourish. But that doesn't mean to say that every participant is highly disturbed. However, when you're going out of that, when you're looking at an individual crime, as we are with spree killers, which is what this man is, and there are other examples, going postal in the United States, what you've got there is something that is surely part of an underlying disturbance, but doesn't mean that someone has a mental illness. It doesn't mean that they are psychotic, say, and out of touch with reality, and that they're often able to plan. That they're able to plan isn't proof that they're not mentally ill. But, it helps, because people with a serious psychotic illness, an acute florid psychotic illness, will often be very chaotic anyway and not be able to plan this kind of thing.
All right, well, he planned it and he did it. And clearly
but he planned it and he did it.
He's a spree killer. But Oliver James, fascinating what Mike's saying there about talking about those regimes where we had mass killing and some mass sadism. and a complete lack of humanity. And some people flourish, Stalinism, Cultural Revolution, Nazism, Rwandan genocide. Some people flourished, unfortunately it's a long list, in those situations and revelled in those situations, Oliver. Many acquiesced and went along with it and were able to dehumanize people. How many of us listening now, going about our business, are able to be in that latter category of acquiescence, Oliver?
Well, of course, there are famous studies which show that the vast majority of us, if placed in that situation, will acquiesce, sadly. But I think that Mike's, of course, making absolutely right points. And I think the key distinction, perhaps, between an ordinarily acquiescing member of the Nazi regime and an ordinary person implementing George Osborne's arguably insane economic policies. They're both.
I didn't think I'd get George Osborne's name mentioned in a your call about Anders Breivik, to be quite honest with you. The average Nazi or German member of the German population was not technically mad in the sense that they didn't have any, strictly speaking, delusional beliefs. They didn't actually hallucinate something that wasn't there. They didn't hear voices. They didn't see things. Unlike possibly Tony Blair, they didn't hear God telling them to do anything. They simply were part of a system in which it appeared that the sane and rational choice was for them to take part in this system. And obviously, it turns out, that of course it was completely wrong in every possible way to suppose that there was anything wrong with Jews and that the solution was to murder them. But it's very, very different. There's a very big difference between that and, as Mike says, that the people in the concentration camps who were really, there were some people who had the potential to be crazy who then fulfilled that potential through being in that social system. So if he's reveling in this because of his ideology, should we be applying the same is he insane argument to the 9/11 terrorists, to the 7/7 terrorists, and to any jihadist who is similarly able to dehumanize their, quote, enemy?
Well, quite. You see, I think you'd find there's a huge difference between the people who flew the aeroplanes into the World Trade Center and this gentleman.
Well, what is the difference?
Well, the difference is probably
they have a guiding ideology.
Yeah, they both have a guiding ideology, but the difference is that this guy will almost certainly believe that all sorts of things that are absolutely for sure not true were true.
Well, I'm still ticking their box.
Sorry?
I'm still ticking their box. They're believing that all sorts of things...
The jihadists will have held beliefs that are much more debatable. So they will have said, America is the great Satan, America is poisoning the world. Well, I happen to agree with them about that to a large degree. I just don't happen to think that flying a plane into 9/11, not that the World Trade Center is the solution, but
okay, but you might similarly say that some people might come on, as they frequently do, come on the radio, whether you agree with them or not, and say there's too much immigration in Europe. I mean, but then we get to the particular points about I'm going to go to paradise with how many different varieties of virgin it is, I can't remember, because I do this, and God is going to reward me for doing this. That is similarly deranged.
Well, certainly, according to Richard Dawkins, it is. Although I think religion is a kind of special case.
Anders Breivik has his religion.
Yes, I think Anders Breivik. I think the key difference is I once interviewed a spree killer, and normally spree killing is a form of homicide-suicide. So normally it's a way of killing yourself. And this guy had been appallingly maltreated by his parents from a very young age. He was living at home. And he found himself becoming deluded. One radio station told him to go out and kill a whole lot of people. Another radio station told him, it was God's radio station, told him not to. He had delusions like that. And eventually he did, in fact, kill all his family. And in some respects, it was completely sane.
Okay. Oh, listen, we're going to bring in other voices now. But listen, we're going to just regroup after we've heard from Michelle. Then we'll come to the callers, 0500 909 693, and we've got a reporter at the courtroom, 924.
Your call.
9:26, discussing Breivik, the insanity or not of him. We're going to speak to Nadia in Manchester, Ron in Northumberland, Tony in Dover and Scott in Nottingham. Good morning. Thank you all very much. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Excellent. First of all, Lars Bevinger, who's at the courtroom, our reporter there. What's the latest, Lars?
Well, Breivik has just taken the stand and started his 30-minute speech, if you like. He's prepared this, written it down, and the judge has allowed him to read it aloud. It's basically a lot of what he had written already in his so-called manifesto, which he published shortly before he went on his killing spree last year, in which he basically claims that the Norwegian state is a Marxist dictatorship, and he represents a cultural conservative elite which have been suppressed for too many years, and this is the war that he says he's fighting, and these are the reasons, very hard to understand they might be, that he's giving for what he did.
Okay, thank you very much, Lars. Nadia in Manchester, what do you think?
I was just listening. Hi, Nicky, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
I was just listening to the psychiatrist earlier saying that he had an element of mental health issues or insanity. I feel that this was very calculating, and my question is that was also Bin Laden crazy as well, and the rest of them. I just feel that hatred plays a big role where people they kind of use their views of to spread the ideology. That's what Bin Laden did, and kill innocent people. And I think he also did that, and which to me logically looks that he has killed young innocent Norwegian, because he knows that this will get to the core of politicians and the Norwegian themselves. But if he had killed pensioners or even Muslims, I don't think we'll even have this debate today, because it's just going to be, he was not well, he was crazy, and the story ends there.
But you make a very good point. Tony in Dover, what do you want to say, Tony?
Well, very briefly, I'm not into big words. I've been listening to the more cleverer types that have been talking earlier on in your programme, Nicky, and I'm just speaking as I'm a 71-year-old man now. I'm an ordinary person, and for years I've seen this going on in this country, and I can understand where this guy comes from in a way. He's not insane, there's no doubt about that, but people are getting a bit worried because they can't find him to be insane, if you know what I mean. It seems a twisted fact, really.
What do you mean you understand where he comes from?
Well, I do, because I think nobody listens to anybody. I mean, in this country, we've got this so-called multicultural society. Now, I'm not a right-winger, I'm not even National Front or anything like that. In fact, I'm a Labour man, but I think that this country is going down the same road like Norway. Norway's a lovely, lovely country, but suddenly it's been invaded by all these alternatives, these Muslims and people like that, and the same thing is happening here.
Okay, Mike Isaac. Okay, I'm here. Stay there if you want. Mike Isaac, this is fascinating, isn't it? Because we heard there. Are you still there,
yes,
Mike?
I'm here. Yeah.
Did you hear Tony in Dover there?
Yep.
A man who is, not apologising for him, but is buying the narrative in the same way that when a jihadist does something, there are elements who think it's wrong, but buy the narrative. So isn't that fascinating, Mike Isaac?
It is indeed, and I think the question, when we're using the term sanity, insanity very freely, they're legal terms, they're not medical terms. I think that's one important point. But the other thing is, though, that there are plenty of people who are angry about various issues in society about multiculturalism, very angry, seething with rage, but they don't go out and shoot a whole lot of other people. Similarly, there are many people in the Muslim world who have a profoundly negative view of everything Western.
We heard Oliver James as well talking about. We heard of Oliver James talking about America as the great poison of the world.
But none of these people would dream of flying a plane into a building or committing mass murder in the name of that cause. There is something very special, and I don't mean in a good way, about people who will go that further step and act out.
Right. So is that
critical?
Is that line the line of sanity or not? Scott in Nottingham, what do you think?
I just think it's a little bit all too easy for the media to explain away the actions of someone that they can't explain, really, by saying either, he's a nutter, or blame it on a video game or a film or something. It's like, main point being, yesterday morning on Victoria Derbyshire's show, she insinuated that he was influenced by World of Warcraft, which she described as a violent online computer game.
No, listen, I didn't hear it. Vic's a brilliant journalist, and I didn't hear it, and I'm sure I'm sure she would not have said that was the reason. She would have been just looking at all the factors in his life. But listen, but you think the media has a responsibility here to play this absolutely straight, clearly, Scott?
I think so, yeah. And it's just the way that it was put into the news bulletin she was giving at the time. And when she described it as a violent computer game, I was sat here logged on. I work from home, and I was on one of my characters at the time. And I'd spent an hour and a half, and I kid you not, fishing, cooking, and picking herbs, which, in my book, isn't particularly violent. Okay, the night before, me and some mates tried to kill a big dragon. So if a big dragon turns up at the bottom of my street, I'll be first in line.
I'll call you, Scott. If that happens, I'll give you a call just in case.
Exactly.
All right, let's get one more. Ron, thanks very much, Scott. Ron in Northumberland, go on.
Hello there. Hello.
Hello, are you there, Ron? Quick point, please.
Yes, I am. Right. My point is that people seem to be trying to judge this man by his ideology, and what seems to have escaped the discussion. I'm a gay person who's been attacked by fascists in the past. What seems to the step that the extra step you've been trying to outline is these people have delusions of persecution. They feel persecuted by foreignness, by Muslims, by difference, by gay people, etc. They then take the second step from being deluded into taking actions. And the Norwegian definition of insanity being capacity of being unable to plan, i.e. that if you can plan a terrible action like this, therefore you're not insane, would not apply in the UK. He's clearly got delusions of persecution, which justifies to him his attacks, and then he adopts the ideology to then, as his armour, in a sense. So discussing the ideology in terms of
that's fascinating. So that the ideology comes next. That's the kind of armour. That's the justification. That's the post facto justification, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, in lots of these cases, the individuals are very sadly terribly maltreated and abused as children. And then they feel alone, they feel they're the instrument of other people, they then feel that other things are acting upon them, then the delusion becomes persecutory, they feel invaded by other people's feelings or other people's actions, and so he can be an instrument of his delusion.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Ron. It's 9:34. Some really interesting contributions. Maybe yours is still to come. 0500 909 693. We're talking about the sanity or otherwise of Anders Breivik. Norman's in Lancaster, Musa is in London, Marcus is in Bristol, and Tim has got in touch with us as well. Let me just tell you some of the things he's been saying. Anders Breivik, what's happening in the court. He's currently reading a written statement prepared while he was in custody. He has said what happened the last time a real democracy came to power? Hitler was in charge. He has said, can Norway be called a democracy as long as news agencies promote multicultural values? The answer is no. He said, they try to claim I am a mean and insane person, an antisocial psychopath, a pathetic baby killer, a paedophile. They also claim I have physical and mental defects. He said, I have carried out the most sophisticated and spectacular political attack committed in Europe since the Second World War. Tim, I believe you were in Oslo when he struck.
Yes, good morning, Nicky.
Morning. What do you think about him?
I think he's very intelligent, and he was just caught up originally from frustration, thinking there was a cause which he'd lost out in life, and his loneliness. The area of Oslo he lives in has changed massively. I've known Oslo for about 30 years, go 2 or 3 times a year, and indeed it has changed over those years, and he just found his frustration. He could use the excuse of belonging to a cause, but it was a personal crusade, and he found as it got more stronger, he didn't have any morals to know what he was doing.
Mm. Is there any? We've had somebody already this morning here. I think it was Tony in Dover saying, "Oh, I would not, condone what he did, but I kind of know where he's coming from." I think that was the exact phrase. Are there people in Norway, an element of society who have a sneaking sympathy for what this man did?
Absolutely. In fact, there was a BBC programme on BBC Two on Sunday evening at 9 o'clock, and they were interviewing Norwegians as well. And there were Norwegians there saying they have sympathy with what he's done, but of course you don't take that route. We had friends staying this weekend from Ålesund, which is a beautiful area on the west coast of Norway, and when they come into Oslo now, they can't believe the changes over the past few years. It used to be completely Scandinavian, therefore as white as possible, and of course as it hasn't had colonies, Norway hasn't had colonies, they haven't had the obligation to bring people in. And there's many people in Norway could see that, but of course you don't act as Breivik has done to deal with it.
Musa, what do you think? Good morning.
Sir, I had the point, but I just wanted to reply to his point.
Please reply.
So let's to this gentleman's point. So taking it from his analogy, so basically what he's saying is, we have sympathy with you, but you shouldn't have gone that way. Shouldn't have gone what way? He massacred his own people. Like I told your researcher, only 4 people are Muslim. 4. Out of 77 people. So what are the rest? White European
Christians? Doesn't
Christians.
matter. He's killed 77 human beings, you know?
Yeah, I understand that. But my issue is with regards to his cause. They're all human beings. It's all loss of life. It's not about Islam or non-Islam. I'm talking from his point of view, Nicky. He's saying, I want to eradicate Islam from Europe, and I'm doing it by killing 74 white Europeans. Is that logical? And the other point that I'm trying to make is, the guy's just evil. Most people can't get through their head, how can you kill another human being? He's evil. He threw a bomb to distract the police, then he went to Ireland and picked them off, like his birds on the sky. He's evil. Evil, end of story. He shouldn't get any... He killed 14-year-old kids. For what? For what? Because they want to go on holiday or because they're going to be the future politicians. He's just evil. End of story.
So is anyone who plans and does anything like this Anders Breivik, the 7/7 bombers, they're just evil?
They're evil, absolute evil. How can you carry a bomb into the train and kill other human beings?
What does evil mean? Does evil mean mad?
No, evil does not mean mad. Evil means you're calculated, but you have no sense of humanity. You lost your sense of humanity. When you see another human being in pain, he didn't cry. He cried over his own manifesto. When you see little kids, 14-year-old coming on TV, I cried. I don't know none of these kids. They have nothing to do with me. But it's my humanity that comes along. Evil means he's not a human being no more.
Roger in Gloucestershire. Good morning, Roger.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you, Moose. Thank you very much. Hello, Roger.
Hello, hi.
The floor is yours.
Well, I've been listening to the discussion this morning, and I attended the trial of a serial murder in France 2 or 3 years ago. In this case, it wasn't political or racially motivated that he committed his crimes, but I have noticed that having attended the trial and seeing this man only a few yards away, a similar lack of emotion that he showed, an absence of the kind of what you call the normal human feelings.
What was his name?
Sorry?
What was his name? We might remember the case.
Yeah, his name was Michel Fourniret. He was subsequently found guilty of 7 murders of young women in France and Belgium about 2 to 3 years ago. But he showed the same self-justification for his actions and the same deep calculation as Breivik appears to have shown. In his case, he was found sane, he's not in a mental institution, and he's now in jail for the rest of his life, and I quite agree with that verdict.
Why did you particularly attend that trial?
Because this man was a suspect in the murder of my daughter in 1990.
Right. And do you believe he did kill her?
I do, yes. Right. Although, unfortunately, the evidence for his prosecution for our daughter's murder has been lost, or it's not now available for quite difficult reasons to explain.
Right. What was your daughter on holiday there at the time?
No, she wasn't on holiday. She was working as part of a university degree course at a school in Burgundy, and she was just due to come home, and this man who lived in that area at that time, or at least he was active in that area, and subsequently found guilty of the murder of one young woman in that area. There are a lot of similarities with what his crimes showed in other of his cases with what happened to our daughter.
Right. And he's not admitted it, he's not talking about it.
No, he's not admitted it. He appears to think that he's on a different intellectual level with the rest of us, but he appears very cold, showing a complete lack of what you might call human emotions or feelings. And really,
you're left in this, Roger. I extend my heartfelt feelings to you and your family. You're left in this terrible, terrible limbo, and you must see such similarities in that. You know, I'm on a higher intellectual plane than the rest of you.
That's right. Yes, I do see some similarities. I mean, it's early days, but you know, from what I've seen of the trial at the moment, there are similarities there. You know, complete absence of any kind of contact with the level of emotion that most of us can show.
Right, and your daughter's name, just to honour her memory?
Yeah, Joanna Parrish.
Joanna, right. Listen,
right.
Thank you very much for that.
That's okay, you're welcome.
Call, Roger. Very interesting. Thank you, Roger in Gloucestershire there. Just before the travel news from Michel, some more from Anders Breivik's written statement he's giving in the court in Oslo at the moment. We militant nationalists know what is in store when we decide to fight. We try to save your people, but the majority accept the information that is cascaded on them. Before I did the acts, I said I would be demonized. Dying for your people is not only our right, but our duty. I'm not scared by the prospect of being in prison all my life. I was born in a prison where I could not express my beliefs. You cannot expect me to applaud the destruction of my country. This prison is called Norway. It's at 9:50. Here's the latest travel information.
Your call.
Marcus in Bristol. Hello, Marcus. Back to our discussion on Anders Breivik.
Morning, Nicky. I've just been listening to this whole kind of debate about whether this guy is insane or not. And what I find incredible is that here we are, here the media are, here the world is trying to convince themselves that there's no way that a man could do this and be sane, when in actual fact he has argued consistently and strongly that he is sane, and that the acts that he committed were committed of sound mind. He meticulously planned them. He had an ideology which he believed in, and based on that ideology, he planned these events. Now, today, that's evil. But who knows what that will be looked back in time. If, for example, if you compare it to, say, what Nelson Mandela did back in the 60s. Back then, in colonial South Africa, what he done was classed as evil. Today, he's a freedom fighter.
Whoa.
And you know, so I just find it incredible that the argument about whether he's insane or not is actually happening, because in actual fact, the guy sounds to me quite sane.
I don't think Nelson Mandela, for all the African National Congress's actions, did anything, or anyone from the African National Congress did anything approaching this. But, you know, anyway, John in Gloucestershire. Hello, John.
Hi, Nicky.
Yeah, very well. On you go.
Hello?
Do you want to say something, John?
Yeah, I was just listening to what that guy said. I sort of pretty much agree with him, apart from the Nelson Mandela bit. He went off track a bit, I thought. But I'd just like to say that in a society, we've all got our own personal belief systems, and it's a belief system. The majority belief system in a society is generally what's accepted as being normal. Well, that guy, I mean, he's obviously got his own belief system, which is very, very different to yours or I. And so, you know, he's gone ahead and did what he did because he believed it to be okay.
And crucially, his belief system does not counter or entertain any other belief system, which I believe, my belief system is to try and understand all belief systems adds to the richness and interest of life. It's that closed mind thing, isn't it?
Well, I don't really, I'm not an expert in these matters. I don't want to try and analyse it. But I think that maybe it's his belief system that led him to do what he did as being, he thought, well, I'm going to do this because I think it's okay, because I believe in whatever it is he does believe in. So what I now think is that, well, he thinks it's okay, you know, to go around executing people in the way that he did. So I'm thinking, well, if he actually believes that it's okay to go around executing people, why don't we sort of say, well, okay, if you believe in that, well, we'll execute you then.
Okay, thank you. And let's have David in Newbury. Good morning, David.
Hi, Nicky. Hi.
You've been around in Norway a bit, have you?
Well, years ago, when I was a young soldier. And it was interesting to hear your chap who called a few moments ago from Norway sort of saying that there's, sympathy for Breivik. I was amazed when I was in Norway 30 years ago just how nationalistic they are, especially up in the north of the country. And what I'm surprised about is the fact that the Norwegian authorities are giving him this platform.
Is this because of their tradition, as was suggested earlier on by that caller to whom you refer, of monoculturalism? Yeah,
very much so. And also I think it's as well to do with the emancipation of the Norwegian men. They've got no control over what's going on in their country. And their government, over the last 30 years, they've stopped them drinking by massively increasing booze. They've stopped them fighting because you've got to have insurance for your dental treatment. And when I was in the army, we just couldn't understand. They just had nothing to throw back at us. Not that we were sort of fighting, but we were coming from a different culture, and they didn't like us. So it's just anybody who comes in amongst them was sort of scary to them. But what the point I wanted to make was 30 years on, the young men that I was with in Norway then are now the people who are in charge in Norway. And I wonder why it is that they're giving Breivik this platform.
Well, I don't think they're giving him a platform.
Well, they are, Nicky. He has the platform. He's there. You keep reading out sections of what he's saying. And I'm wondering whether there is a lot more of this feeling in Norway than we're sort of being giving credit for.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Thanks for that. Norman in Lancaster, last call. You've got about 30 seconds, Norman.
Yeah, how can a man claim he's insane if he plants a bomb in a town centre, gets changed into a policeman's uniform and takes 70-odd people out? There's no ways. That's premeditated. There's no ways you could say he's a nutter. He's a nasty, evil criminal.
So there's no question of insanity?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Moral insanity, perhaps, but not clinical.
Well, misguided, yes, but it's a premeditated act.
Lack of empathy.
He changed into a policeman's uniform, and the question is, where did he get the policeman's uniform from?
To dehumanise the enemy. It's a common characteristic.
But I've been listening to the programme, and I find it amazing that so many people are coming to his defence. The guy, one of your people.
His defence only in the well, there was defence only to the extent of saying that there are mental health issues. But listen, we're out of time, Norman. You've said what you've said. Thank you very much. Good morning. It's your call. This is BBC Radio 5 Live. I'm Nicky Campbell. So, Anders Breivik, is he insane? The blood of 77 people on his hands. He's due to testify in court this morning. Expected to say he regrets he didn't kill more. He says what he did was a political act, a protest against growing multiculturalism in Norway. So in his mind, it was necessary on the 22nd of July last year to detonate that car bomb in Oslo. In his mind, he was right to then travel to the island of Utøya to massacre those terrified teenagers, many of whom were running for their lives when he shot at them at point-blank range. The work of somebody deranged, just plain evil. Dr. David Holmes is a criminal psychologist. He says Breivik is not insane because he knew what he was doing and he planned it well.
If you're paranoid schizophrenic, then your mind doesn't work very well, and if your mind doesn't work very well, then it's very difficult to plan such a major terrorist attack over a course of 9 years. And on another level, it's almost a bit too convenient to diagnose the man rather than diagnose a part of society, because, I believe that his political views, of course, he takes them to an extreme, but there are varying shades of very many of the same elements in society as they are. Because you have the English Defence League, we don't have an organisation of that, magnitude and level of insanity.
But this is completely different. Whatever one thinks about these
insanity. This is actually in court a aggravating factor rather than a mitigating factor. To have this kind of lack of empathy for others.
Do you agree? Morally insane. Can you be insane and do that sort of thing? Have you met anyone who is absolutely mentally capable, but also capable of pure evil. Anders Breivik. That's the discussion this morning. Is he insane? 0500 909 693. Text 85058. Good morning. It's 6 minutes past 9 o'clock. We're going to speak to Oliver James. I'm delighted to say, the criminologist and author of the F You Up and other works. How your early years affect your adult personality. Oliver, the very man. Good morning to you.
Hi, Nicky.
Hi. And Dr. Mike Isaac as well, a consultant psychiatrist. And do you feel that he is insane, or is he in control of his faculties, utterly rational, utterly logical, or do you think that that is not the case?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's important for me to underline that it's important for me that this is the court's decision and not mine. I can only speak to what I'm more comfortable with, or what I have an easier time reconciling with my observations. And in terms of him as it is indeed very difficult for me to reconcile his actions and the detailed level of planning and so on and so forth with on one level with a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, because as far as I've been able to determine, if you're...
South London Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. Dr. Mike, hello to you.
Morning.
The question is on the insanity or otherwise of Anders Breivik. How can a man do that? How can somebody do that and not be insane? We've got Scott in Nottingham, we've got Brian in Abingdon, but first of all, Tore Bekkedal, who was on the island of Utøya when Breivik carried out the attacks. Tore, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, good morning. I mean, you managed to hide in a bathroom when the attacks were being carried out. What's it like for you now, watching him in court?
Well, of course, it's no merry reunion. It's not a person I enjoy seeing. But at the same time, it's a relief to see a normal court procedure proceeding as much as you can use the word normal in this context, of course.